This week, Ryan builds a candy box. Okay guys, so it's time to model my candy dish. I'm in Autodesk Inventor here. It's the student version, so it's free to download. It lasts for about 3 years. Um, and if you're just now starting out with 3D modeling, I highly suggest getting this program. There's a lot of tutorials online via YouTube and the Autodesk website. So if you want to start off doing something simple like a candy dish, I would highly suggest it. There's not too many parts to a candy dish, and figuring out fit tolerances and how parts actually go together. This is probably an easy project for you to start with. So let's get to it. So we're gonna start a sketch, and so I'm gonna start on the XY plane. That's just because that's the base of my printer, and I figured we'll do an easy shape for my candy dish here, and we'll do a polygon. Let's go ahead and project some geometry here, maybe the X and the Y axis. That way we can dimensionally set our polygon here. So right now I'm going to use the parallel constraint to take the top of the polygon and make it parallel with the x-axis, and then I'm going to dimension out the overall dimension. Now my printer can print about 7 inches, but I'm going to go a little smaller than that, 6 inches. Make sure that it fits on the bed of my printer. Now we can finish out our sketch, and this is going to be the base of our candy jar. So let's go ahead and extrude it out, and we don't need it too thick. I think 1/8 inch, 0.125 of an inch is a pretty good distance. Now let's go ahead and build our walls, and here's a really easy way to do that. You can start your sketch on the back side of the base of the part, and then use the offset function. Well, first project the geometry of the base, and then use the offset function and select that geometry. And let's say we can do a wall thickness of 3/8. You don't have to do 3/8, but you can do 3/8, a 1/2 inch, or an 1/8 inch. I would suggest sticking around in the 1/4 inch range or 3/8 range, just because you want some kind of structural support there. So let's go ahead and finish that sketch out. Now we'll just extrude our wall that we just made out, and we're going to change the direction of it and maybe go 2.5 inches up. So there we go. We have a bowl that's in the shape of a nut, basically. Pretty simple design there. And you could get fancy if you want. Maybe if you wanted to add some words on the side, we'll go ahead and project the side of the geometry there and do a couple construction lines. This way we can dimensionally constrain out our text, and everything will fit all right. So I'm just selecting the midpoints of the projected geometry so I can have my center point here. Now I'll go ahead and add the text box, and we'll go ahead and put in here candy. So we'll make this text bolded just so you can see it a little bit more, and just so it's a little thicker on the extrusion process, and about a 1/2 inch tall on the words will be all right. So it came in, and it's not quite upright. This is why I set the actual construction line so I can make everything. But before I start moving this around, I suggest dimensioning out the actual text box, just so Autodesk doesn't start moving things around and make things a little more difficult. So let's go ahead and make this top line parallel with the top of our projected geometry. And then let's go ahead and make this bottom line of our text box collinear with our midline. And now let's set our center, constrain it out to be in the center. Alright, so the text is constrained out. Let's finish the sketch, and let's extrude this. So through my experience, you don't want to go too much bigger than a 16th when it comes to text, just because the words kind of get meshed together and they don't print out very good. So let's go ahead and put a 16th extrusion here and extrude out a 16th. There's our text. All right. So now let's go ahead and build a top. Now we could save this as a part and then drop it into the assembly and then build our part on top of that in the assembly mode, start different sketches, different parts. But it's easier for me, it might not be for you, but it's easier for me just to go ahead and do an offset plane, and we'll come off the top of our candy dish a 1/2 inch. Now I can start building the top on this work plane that I just created. So let's go ahead and start a sketch there, and we'll project the geometry of the outside of our candy dish, and we'll finish the sketch. And then we'll extrude that projected geometry up an 1/8 inch, 0.125, enter. Okay, so there's our top. Now we probably want to put a ring on the bottom side of our top just to keep the lid in place. So let's go ahead and start that. We'll just start the sketch on top. I know we want it on the bottom, but this makes things a little easier. And then we'll project the inside ring of our candy dish. Now this is important here because we're going to have a fit tolerance, and we want things to go together and not be blocked. So we're going to have to use the offset function here. Now my printer prints 25 thousandths on the large side. So if I put 0.025 on this offset, it's going to bring the geometry in. Now if I just printed it out at that point, it would be an extreme friction fit joint and the lid would not come off very easily. So we want to also add like a fit tolerance here, and since we want it to be basically friction free, I would say 50 thousandths. So we're coming in on all sides here, 75 thousandths, which is pretty decent. Now we'll use the offset function again, and we'll grab that same line we just created, and we'll bring it in 1/8 of an inch. This will create the actual thickness of our ring that's going to go down into the candy box. So let's finish that out, and then we'll extrude it. Select this, and then we'll extrude it the opposite direction, and we'll make sure we're adding the material here, and we'll go down a 1/2 inch. Now what will show up on the bottom here won't be a 1/2 inch because it's coming from the top of our lid, so it'll be 3/8 of an inch down. So that's fine for me. Okay. Alright. So it looks like we have a pretty good lid there. Let's go ahead and start designing maybe our handle on top of it. But first, let's go ahead and put a hole in the center of our lid, so that we can have our little knob or handle or whatever actually attached to the lid, because we're going to print this off in 3 different parts. We're going to print the candy base, and then we're going to print the candy top, and then the candy lid, and then we're going to print the handle. So, and then we'll just put everything together when it's finished. Now here, let's go ahead and project the geometry of the top of our lid, and then draw a circle in the center, and we'll call it 3/8 of an inch. Now we'll finish that sketch out and remove that material. So we'll reverse, and it doesn't really matter if it's 0.5 or whatever, as long as it's not going through the whole entire part. So that looks good for me. Alright, so now let's start actually building our handle for the lid, and I'm going to do another offset plane, and we'll come off the top of it a 1/2 inch. And now we'll start our sketch on that second work plane that we just created. And we'll project some geometry here. We'll project this circle. Okay, now here comes another fit tolerance that you have to kind of know what's going on. We need to offset it with my printer offset, which is 0.025. And then we also probably need to do like a friction fit tolerance, which is somewhere in between the 5 to 10 thousandths range. I'm going to go on the bigger side here and say 10 thousandths. So I took my printing offset of 25 thousandths, and then I added the friction fit tolerance of 10 thousandths. And since we're going, it's a circle, and if we take this dimension here, we're actually going to be doubling that dimension. So we need to divide everything by 2. So let's go ahead and add some parentheses in this calculation so that it knows to divide everything by 2, and we have our fit tolerance of 18 thousandths. And then we'll finish the sketch out. So now we'll extrude this little circle here, and since our lid is only an 1/8 inch thick, let's go ahead and extrude it out an 1/8 inch and finish that sketch off. Now let's go ahead and create the part that actually mounts on the surface of our lid. So we'll project this geometry out, and then we'll offset it. Now let's offset it 1/8 of an inch. There we go. That looks pretty good. So we'll finish the sketch out and extrude it up about 1 inch. 1 inch. Finish. Okay, so now we kind of have our little pin there that will fit in our lid, and it's set up to be a friction fit tolerant, so we can add a little super glue to it and be done with it. However, I just don't want a little knob here, no pin here. I actually want to put a little circle on top of it. So let's go ahead and do that. We'll start our sketch on the YZ plane, and we'll project out the geometry of our little pin that we created and draw a line going down to the center, down there. Okay, so let's dimension out from this point to the top of that, and we'll say a 1/2 inch. Okay, and it looks like we probably need to dimension out project a couple more geometry, maybe the z-axis, and we'll say that line is collinear of the z-axis. Okay, so Autodesk like that, and now let's go ahead and do a circle from the top of that line out and call it 1 inch in diameter. I don't like that at all. So let's call it 1.5 inches, 1.5. Okay, that looks good. So now we have an issue of when we revolve this, Autodesk isn't going to like it because it's going to intersect the sketch, and it doesn't like that. So we need to remove half of our circle. So we'll just kind of draw a line and then go to trim and then trim out half of our circle. We'll finish that sketch out, and now we'll revolve our circle around the z-axis, full revolution. Okay, so now we have a little handle on top modeled out, so everything's set up. So when we drop this into Cura or your slicing engine or whatever, you can just split it into parts, and it's very easy for the software to recognize where the parts begin and end. So just saying split into parts is pretty good here. So looks like we did a pretty good job designing our candy dish. I like it. Let's print it. Hey guys, so I printed off my lid, and I have a little bit of a warping issue on this box lid. So what I'm gonna do is use a blow dryer on high heat and kind of relax the material a little bit, and then press it flat and see if that works. I don't know, I haven't tried this before, but here goes the test. Wow, so that really worked, and it's much better now. I think I can live with this fit here. And I'm surprised the lid fit. This is the biggest part I've ever printed on my printer before. And I'm really shocked that it held the tolerances that I wanted it to. I could have had a little tighter fit for the inside lip right here, but I mean, it's not too much. Looks like probably about a 50 thousandths overkill on the tolerance, so I probably could have minus my fit tolerance by 25 thousandths, and it would be a little bit tighter, but I think it's pretty good. So once my my top gets printed off, I'll go ahead and assemble it. Okay, so I printed out my top, and I had a little melting issue. If you can see it, I don't know if you can, but that's just because I don't have two cooling fans, and I have my fan set to about 40% of its fan speed, just because I print really big parts and I don't want to cool the material down too much. So I probably should have set my fan speed up a little bit, now that I think about it in hindsight. Having my cooling fan at 100% probably would have prevented this melting issue, but I'm not going to call it a bad part. I'm going to go ahead and clean it up and mount it on our top here and call it a done project. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. Now we just wait. Alright. So I'm going to go ahead and melt this down a little bit with my soldering iron. Maybe. Kind of blend the plastics here. We have a finished candy box. Just gonna clean this up a little bit with a little bit of soap and water. Maybe take some of this tape off of here, and then it'll be done. Yeah, not too shabby. Turned out pretty good. Thanks for watching my video. If you like what you see, be sure to subscribe. I make a video about it every week. If you want to see more, click on the video up there. If you have a suggestion, click on this video and leave the idea in the comment section. Thanks again!